Let's talk about how you're going to make the bench hook. In the process that follows, I'm going to show just using hand tools to make this bench hook, but you could feel free to use a table saw or any other power tools that you would like to make the bench hook to help improve your hand tool woodworking.
We start our build by laying out a line that's perpendicular to the edge of our board. I next use a magnetic saw guide that was made in a recent video. Here I simply register the magnetic saw guide against the edge of the board, and then I grab a western back saw and I cut the line perpendicular to my edge. Afterwards, I check whether or not the edge is square. While it's not necessary for it to be perfectly square, I was just having some fun. I next use the width of the base for the bench hook to determine the length for each of the cleats. Here I just lay the cleats underneath the base and just mark their length. I next use the magnetic saw guide to cut the cleat to length. Here it's important that it is square, so we will see that I check whether or not it's square after finishing cutting. This is our second cleat that I need to cut that goes along the underneath side of our bench hook. Here you can see I use the same process, and I use the magnetic saw guide to make sure I get a square cut. For the bench hook that I made in this video, I did not make the cleats the same width. So here you can see I'm laying out 90 and 45 degree angles on the bench hooks so that I can see where those saw curves will be when I cut them. Your process for installing the cleats matters. Here you can see that I first anchor one side by installing a screw. I then use a combination square to make sure that my cleat remains at a 90 degree angle to my edge while I'm installing the second screw. This helps ensure that the cleat is 90 degrees to the edge of the board. I've now flipped over my bench hook and I'm working on the other side. I'm installing the cleat. Here you can see that I anchor one side and then use the combination square to make sure that I have a cleat that is square to the edge of my board again. With both cleats installed, the only thing left to do is to create saw curves at the angles we want. Here I wanted a 90 degree angle and also two 45 degree angles. So I'm using my magnetic saw guide so I can create accurate 45 and 90 degree angles relative to my cleat. I went over to the workbench to make the 45 and 90 degree angles on my other cleat. While this was in part to give you a better view of the process, turns out that I didn't do such a good job, my arm gets in the way. But I did do my best to show you what was going on, and using the magnetic saw guide I was able to cut some accurate 45 and 90 degree angles.